Hey, what's going on, guys? It's NTDP here again. Wanted to make another video talking about more players that are relevant on this year's team for the upcoming 2017-2018 season. So, starting with the U-18 group, a group that a lot of us have seen a little bit more. We know more about these players. We've seen them play, unlike a lot of the guys on the incoming U-17 roster, the 2001 birth years. I've seen a few of them play in the U-16 Nationals in Pittsburgh last April. I made a little post about that. I do go watch the Cleveland Barons U-16 AAA team, so that's how I saw like Case McCarthy, for example. But just sticking with the U-18 squad, first and foremost, there's going to be a new player on this team. I believe Gavin Hain, a player that played Minnesota high school hockey. He's going to take the place, I would assume, of Blade Jenkins, who signed in the OHL with the Saginaw Spirit. Can't talk much about Gavin Hain. I mean, I saw him play at the recent Ivan Hlinka tournament for Team USA. Obviously, yeah, he's a good player. He did have a cup of coffee with the U-17s last year. That happens a lot. I mean, you see a lot of these players that, whether it be due to injury, maybe a player from the U-17s gets called up to play with the U-18s in the second part of the season, like Oliver Wahlstrom did, for example. You'll see a couple of players maybe get filtered through the program that maybe they were there for the tryouts every year in March for the program, and for one reason or another they didn't make it. So they get brought on to the team for a couple of games here and there, maybe for a long road trip. And if you show well, who knows? I mean, that's how some of these players end up sometimes getting put into consideration for other international events and whatnot. I remember the first time I saw Tim Gettinger, who I just saw live a couple weeks ago at the World Junior Summer Showcase. But first time I saw Tim Gettinger, he played in the U-17 Four Nations tournament, or is it Five Nations, when the team was in Ann Arbor. It's last year at the Ann Arbor Ice Cube. That was the group that had Clayton Keller on it, Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren, and Gettinger was called onto the team for that tournament. Played pretty well. He's actually another local guy. He's from North Olmsted, Ohio. So I actually grew up learning to skate on those rinks out there in North Olmsted. So, but and now look at where he is. I mean, he went the OHL route. He was playing and still does with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League at the time. But just because you play in the OHL, it doesn't mean that the program might not give you a chance every so often to. And I'm talking about the National Team Development Program. I'm not talking about USA Hockey in general when it comes to the World Juniors and whatnot. I'm talking about the National Team Development Program. Usually that doesn't happen. If you're playing in the OHL, it's like, okay, yeah, you're playing in the OHL. You're playing a 68 game season schedule. I mean, just do your thing. But he was actually, it was pretty cool. He was brought onto that team for that week to play in that tournament right there. Anyway, so with the U-18 group, I got the roster pulled up here. Goalies this year, I don't think there was any changes between Keegan Karki and Ryan Ullin. Hard to really get into goaltenders. I mean, I never played the position. It's hard to kind of break down and analyze goaltenders. I mean, I think it's more than just looking at numbers at times, and it's a lot like that for forwards and defensemen as well, in my opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, they have to pass what's called the eye test, right? I mean, scouts will often say they could be going to a game to watch a certain player that they already know about. Maybe it's a kid that they already have drafted into their system, but all it takes is one moment for them to notice a certain different player out there. A true story that I read before about Dustin Byfuglien, playing in I think he played in the Western Hockey League. There was scouts that were going to watch, I think it was Braden Coburn play for, maybe it was the Prince George Cougars, I can't remember. But that's how they noticed Dustin Byfuglien. one of the scouts that was there to scout Braden Coburn couldn't keep his eyes off this other guy that was out there. I don't know if it was his D partner. I don't think it was. But that's how they said, hey, who's this guy? So, I mean, that happens a lot. And with goaltenders, I think it's not enough to look at just their win-loss record. For example, there's a time and place for it. Look at a really, really good team in the OHL, for example, right? Let's say you're one of the top 4 teams in the entire league. Well, usually on more nights than not, you dominate against the bottom 4th of the league whenever you play them. So naturally, a goaltender, that's maybe 17 years old, that's on a loaded team, the win-loss record for a goaltender, I think, is more of a team stat rather than the actual goaltender. However, here's where that comes into play. Look at Alex Nedeljkovic, who obviously played for the Whalers, then played for the Firebirds. During his first year in Flint with the Firebirds in 2015, 2016, he was one of the bright spots on that team. They were still going through their rebuild that was started in Plymouth. They were expected to be probably just below a middle-of-the-pack team with the roster that they started with. Obviously, then the coaching situation happened. It was a big blow-up. But he alone kept them in a lot of games. So that's where you look at a player like him and say, okay, he's on a team that's not so good. He has to fight for a lot of their wins, and it's going to be a dogfight in a lot of their games. His win-loss record might come into effect a little bit more than somebody that's on a team that's very, very good. So, obviously you look at the save percentage and whatnot, and just watching them play, goalies can make crazy saves every so often, and that's a good indicator, but it's also, their rebound control and whatnot, how they move laterally. But again, that's not really one of the things that I'm crazy about looking at or trying to analyze. There's other people that do that. I'm not a huge, goaltender guy when I'm looking at players play. But naturally, they are fun to watch. Dylan St. Cyr, for example, who we just saw with the U-18s this year, terrific puck handler. One of the first times I noticed him was in last year's Under-17 World Hockey Challenge. Oh, I'm sorry, that would have been 2 years ago. He had a terrific game against Team Sweden. Terrific game. Made 2 highlight reel saves. And his puck playing ability was on display throughout that whole tournament. So it's things like that I noticed where I was like, okay, this guy I think is going to be a good one to watch. But anyway, both these goalies, capable goaltenders. The U.S. has produced some pretty good goaltenders as of late. You look at the World Juniors, and a lot of fans for Team Canada, for example, have had a lot of things to say about their goaltending in the past. With the United States, it's been pretty even keel. We haven't had a lot of goaltending performances that have really, backfired like crazy on us. We've been pretty fortunate with some of our netminders in some of the recent World Junior tournaments. You look at Jack Campbell in 2010, how he was a member of the U-18 team at the time, was a 17-year-old that got his chance to shine. Played well again in 2011 in Buffalo. Then in 2012, that whole team just imploded. And then 2013, you had John Gibson, who was terrific, and so on and so forth. Our goaltenders since then have been pretty decent. It's been just sometimes the team in front of them has had its moments. That can be a topic for another video, maybe the past 7 World Juniors for Team USA or something like that. But anyway, on defense on this U18 team, some pretty good players to look for. So starting out here, Bodie Wild. He's a player that a lot of us knew who he was when he was playing with the Chicago Mission 2 years ago in his U16 Midget AAA year. Chicago Mission has produced a lot of really, really good players. Lots of kids that go to the Ontario Hockey League, the USHL, the NTDP. And that year's team was loaded. This year's team was really good too. I saw them play at Youth Nationals. But Bodie Wild, good defenseman, very mobile. He's big. He's got a really, really good shot. So these are the little things that I've noticed when watching him play. He plays the defensive side of the game well, and also he has the feet and the vision to move the puck up the ice. and his shot is very, very good, especially his wrist shot. Defensemen, the elite defensemen in the game nowadays are some of the ones that don't need to take that big clap bomb from the blue line. They can get the puck on their stick and real quickly send a hard and accurate snapshot or wrist shot on net that can find its way through. And Bodie Wild is like that. I noticed him do it a lot at the Under 17 World Hockey Challenge that was held in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario last year as a member of the U-17s. And that's one of the things that I noticed. I think he has a very, very deadly shot that he can get off real quickly. Obviously, his gap control is good, and he can really move out there. There was some people saying maybe he could have gotten an off-the-wall invite to the World Junior Summer Selection this past summer or a couple weeks ago. I think it's too early for that, and in my opinion, he is very good. And who knows, if he starts the year and plays very, very well throughout October and November, could he be named as like that off-the-wall pick that USA Hockey sometimes brings to the December World Junior Camp? Maybe. But I honestly don't think he's going to be there yet. But he is a very promising young player. Another guy that has his draft rights owned by the Saginaw Spirit. They hit a home run in the OHL priority selection a couple years ago by taking Blade Jenkins and Bodie Wild. He's a Birmingham, Michigan native, committed to Harvard, has said multiple times that he does want to commit to Harvard. He likes the education aspect there. I read an article about him a couple years ago saying that if he doesn't have a career in hockey, he would like to be an investment banker on Wall Street. What better place to go than Harvard to potentially kickstart a career there? Another one that I want to mention is Keandre Miller. So Keandre Miller is a player that in my posts towards the beginning of last year, didn't know a thing about this guy at all. From Hopkins, Minnesota, committed to the University of Wisconsin. He's a guy that I liked a lot. He stood out to me just by watching games. I think I mentioned before that I liked his gap control, which sounds kind of cliche when you're talking about a defenseman, but it's so true. He stands up very well at the blue line. He's physical. He's not afraid to throw bodies around, and he has a smart, active stick. When he's playing in between the dots, for example, it's very, very hard to get pucks through to kind of get your goaltender to move left to right, get your defense to move left to right, and open up those lanes for one-timers. He's very, very good at preventing that. He's very good at playing the 2-on-1 as well. He had multiple times where in games I noticed he broke up 2-on-1s because he played the shooter so well, and they couldn't really thread passes through against this guy. Also, he has an offensive touch to his game as well. I mean, there is a lot of defensemen that pride themselves on the D side of the game, but he's a person that I feel like is a lesser Bodie Wild to an extent. Bold prediction on this guy, he could be a player that really rises up the draft rankings. I don't think he's going to be one of those guys that goes in the top 15 or anything like that, but watch for him to be a potential steal in the drafts come next year. I think he is draft eligible for this year. Ty Emberson, he's a player that I noticed first when he was on that group. A lot of this group that's going to be on the the U-18s this year were members of the Youth Olympics. Now, a lot of people might not remember what that is. It's a tournament or an event that's held every 4 years, I want to say, for literally like 15-year-old athletes. And obviously, with us being hockey fans, a lot of these players played for Team USA that's on this team. Ty Emberson was one of them. I think Bodie Wild wasn't there, I don't think. But Ty Emberson was a player that I noticed then, and I think he played very well on the NTDP as a U-17 player last year. He plays a very good defensive game. Will sneak into the offense. He is committed to Wisconsin as well. He's from Wisconsin. Good player. I like the way he plays the game. You have Adam Samuelson and Matthias Samuelson as well. again, Matias committed to the University of Michigan. Sorry, I looked at the wrong line. And Adam Samuelson is committed to Boston College. I like Adam's game a little bit more. I think that he plays the game with a little bit more tenacity. I think he has a little bit better of a shot. I think he's a little bit more offensive at the blue line, but they're both good players. And I feel like both of these guys have a pretty strong future within USA Hockey. Spencer Stastny, kid from Wisconsin, committed to Notre Dame. Another D-man that kind of flies under the radar, but a lot of these guys are here for a reason, right? I mean, they're all good players. And I think Spencer Stastny, he was actually really good on the PK, if I'm not mistaken, last year. I think he played a lot of PK minutes. Can produce on the power play. He's gotten minutes there. But the next guy, DJ King, is a player that played in the GTHL in his U-16 AAA year. I remember watching him a little bit on some streams there from Northport, New York. Not committed to a college as of yet. I assume this list is updated. However, on the NTDP's website, this is all I'm looking at. On the NTDP's website, they don't have the updated roster for next year's U-18 team, nor the incoming U-17s yet. I mean, the roster is up there, but so DJ King, a player that he's more of just a pure defensive defenseman. He needs to work on his skating a little bit, in my opinion. Bigger guy. He's 6'3", 222 pounds is what it's listed here. But I do like his game a little bit. I feel like there are others on this team that are better than him, but he's a player that I think can improve, and it's good that he went this route, playing against teams in the USHL, which is a very, very good league. I mean, lots of these guys, remember, all of these guys that are on this team, when they come into the program, were some of the best players on their teams for years. They played on the penalty kill and the power play. They're the ones who were always out there on their teams when there's 3 minutes left in the game and you might be down by a goal. Then they come on to a team such as the U.S. Development Program playing against USHL competition, and now they're playing against kids that are 3-4 years older than them. They're just as good as they are, if not better. They're bigger and stronger, that's for sure. Remember last year, the U-17s, this group, their first game, they beat the Muskegon Lumberjacks that did have Andrei Svechnikov on their team, like 7-1, 7-2, something like that. And we're thinking, this group was really hyped up coming into the year. Maybe this will be one of the first times that the 16-year-old group has a strong season throughout the entire year against the USHL. Well, then the Youngstown Phantoms came into town and blasted them 2 straight games, and they started to lose, which is normal, though. I mean, people have to remember that. The people that are going to these games, I mean, I know a lot of times there isn't a lot of fans that are at the NTDP games. You have to look at it for what it is, and it's so cool to have a team like that right in your own backyard. I mean, whenever you look at the U-18 squad on any given year, there could be like 3 first-round picks playing right in front of your eyes. I mean, the Whalers had a lot of years where they had like at least one player drafted in the first round. The NTDP, you're seeing that every single year. And on a lot of occasions, it's more than one kid. And these are going to be players that you end up seeing playing for Team USA in further events, like the U-18s, obviously, the World Juniors, Men's World Championships, possibly the Olympics. I mean, these guys are future NHL stars. Just because they don't necessarily play the same type of format that you're used to seeing the Whalers play, get out there and watch these guys play, because it's still tremendous hockey. It's not far off from the OHL as far as the pace of play is concerned. Yes, the OHL is the better overall league. I know that. I understand that. I follow the CHL very heavily. But this is incredible hockey to watch. So get out there and watch these guys play. Now to the forwards. Joel Farabee. A kid that is drafted actually by my favorite team in the OHL, the Flint Firebirds. I believe he's drafted by him. Yeah, he is. He's from Cicero, New York. I remember that. And he's a Boston University commit. This kid's really good, really good. I noticed him from game number one last year playing with the NTDP U-17s. He quick, got fast hands, and a very, very underrated and fast shot. He gets his shot off very, very quickly. It's hard. It's very accurate. He's a player that I think was called up to play with the U-18s during the IIHF World Under-18s last year. So a really, really good player. Watch for him this year. He's going to be one of the top players on this team for sure. Another one that I wanted to bring up, I'm at 20 minutes here. I'm probably going to divide this into two videos, one talking about this group and then the next group. Jake Wise. Okay, so he's a guy that a lot of us were watching heavily. I know a lot of people, especially a lot of Canadians that came to our thread with the NTDP thread, looking at what this guy was doing on a regular basis, And the general consensus from guys that didn't watch him play was, yeah, it sounds like he does a lot of good things out there, but his plays generally lead to nothing. Well, this guy has shown a lot of flashes of being a really good player, and I think he was hyped up a little too early, primarily because of one of his high school coaches in Massachusetts saying that when he was like 13 or 14, he was either on par or better than Jack Eichel was at that time. And, the kid obviously is really, really good, but when we have access to information so quickly and social media and whatnot, a lot of times it just kind of gets in the way of letting a player develop. And like I said before with the eye test and just watching these guys play, you got to appreciate them for what they are and just watching their games develop. And I've seen a lot from this guy. During the first 8 games or so of the year against USHL teams when he kind of struggled, then you go and watch him play against players of his own peer group at the Under-17 World Hockey Challenge that was in Sault Ste. Marie. And I think he played a lot better in that tournament. He had, and I don't have anything pulled up right now. I can't remember what his point totals were, how many goals he scored. But I remember saying to myself, that's the player that he can become. When you see him play against players of his own age group, you see him show a little bit more of his stuff there. Patrick Giles is another kid that I actually liked. He had a few flashing moments, but these are the kind of guys that make up this program. Remember, this as a whole is more of an all-star caliber type team, but at the end of the day, you got to make it a team. You can't just have players on your D-core where you say, let's have our best offensive type defensemen that are going into their first year of junior hockey eligibility and make them our blue line. You want to have that balance, just like if you were forming a normal team. That's why you have guys on the team like Samuelson, for example, like Ty Emberson, like DJ King. Patrick Giles is a defensive type of forward to an extent, but he also is a big-bodied kid. He's 6'4", from Chevy Chase, Maryland, and he's a BC commit as well. A player that I noticed pretty quickly out there. I think that he obviously needs some work to do. He can develop a little bit more at BC, which isn't an example of a player going to play college just because they need a lot more time to develop. BC is a good program, and they can mold him into a better player as he is right now with the development program, but he's a guy that I think can take a step forward this year, and I'm looking forward to what he can do. Jack DeBoer. I like him a lot, the son of Peter DeBoer, the head coach for the San Jose Sharks from New Jersey, committed to BU. BU is like a pipeline to BC and Boston University. Jack DeBoer, I actually saw him when I went to Windsor to watch the Memorial Cup, the semifinal game. I was standing in the lobby waiting for our tickets at the will call section, and I turn around, and I see Pete DeBoer standing there. And the kid next to him was wearing a USA Hockey pullover. And I said to my dad, I go, that guy right there is the head coach of the San Jose Sharks. And his son, the kid next to him is his son, Jack. And he actually plays with the development program that I sometimes go up there with you and watch. I take my dad to games every so often. He loves it. He loves watching these guys play. We have a lot of fun when we go and watch these and go to travel and watch these teams play. So he knows through me, obviously, he knows who some of these guys are. And it's funny when we'll watch like a pro game together or something. I'll point people out and say we actually saw him play in Youngstown and shit like that, and it'll be fun. So Jack DeBoer, I like his game. He's a good player. He's an offensive forward. He can put the puck in the back of the net. Plays a smart overall hockey game. Good kid. I like him. Also, Jonathan Gruden is another player that I wanted to mention. Jonathan Gruden is the son of John Gruden, who is the head coach for the Hamilton Bulldogs in the Ontario Hockey League. Was an assistant coach with the NTDP for I think like 3 or 4 years, and coached more on the defensive aspect of the game. A lot of players actually credit some of their defensive development on the blue line to John Gruden when he was with the NTDP. Drew Hellickson being one of them. John Gruden is a very, very good player as well. He really meshes in well with the top 6 of this team. From Rochester, Michigan, committed to Miami of Ohio. Another kid that I think is going to be a really good player next year. I mean, this team can be a really, really good team, and kind of back to the U-18 teams that a lot of us are somewhat used to seeing. John Gruden is a kid that can provide some immediate offense, and wherever he goes next year, I assume he's going to go the college route and play at Miami. He's a good one, so you can watch for this kid in some of the years to come. Oliver Wahlstrom, obviously he is who he is. He played for Team USA at the World Under-18s last year as a true underager. He wasn't one of those guys where he's got like a late birthday or whatever. He's a kid from Quincy, Massachusetts, committed to Harvard as well. So those ECAC schools are really picking up a lot of good kids, especially schools like Harvard, Yale, Quinnipiac as of late. Wahlstrom's pretty much the total package. I think he's the best forward on this team. He also was invited to the World Junior Summer Showcase. This kid, I'm going to look to be obviously one of the leaders on this team. Smart player, a very creative player as well. He's one of those guys where he can just make a play happen out of nothing behind the net. He scored a goal at the IIHF Under-18s where the puck took a bounce off the glass behind the net, and he timed it perfectly as it hit the ice to just bat it into the net. A player that has a lot of speed, plays with a slight edge to his game, nothing like Kachuk does or anything like that, but he's a guy that I feel like can be an impact player no matter where he plays. If he was going to go the major junior route next year, for example, he'd be one of the elite players on that team as well. Quick hands, a devastating shot. I think he has the best shot out of all of our forward players, or all of our offensive forwards. So one person I want to mention too, it's cool to see Eric Mittendorf on this team, a player that I think was also a part of that Youth Olympic squad a couple years ago from Scottsdale, Arizona. Again, I mentioned in my last video how some of these players come from these quote-unquote non-traditional markets. Well, again, here's a kid that played all the way through. I mean, he played his midget AAA hockey, not for Bell Tire or Victory Honda, the Chicago Mission, so on and so forth. He played for the Phoenix Junior Coyotes, which plays against some of the top teams throughout the country. Committed to the University of Denver. He's a player that I think is going to make strides this year. I like his game. He's pretty good, so we'll see what he can do. Jake Pavanka is the last person I want to mention on this team. Played for the Chicago Mission a couple years ago, alongside guys like Bodie Wild. From Woodbridge, Illinois, committed to Notre Dame. We'll see if all these guys end up going to Notre Dame. Remember, Sonny Milano was committed to Notre Dame, then committed to BC, then committed to the Plymouth Whalers. So Jake Pavanka is a big kid. Well, actually, he's not a big kid, and here's why that's interesting. I just noticed now he's 5'11", 189. He plays like he's a big kid. He plays a real physical game, takes the puck to the net, isn't afraid to go to the dirty areas, and he played that way when he was with the Chicago Mission. That's one of the reasons why I was excited to watch him. he was one of those guys that would just kind of bull his way through everybody playing in midget to score a goal, right? And I was like, I just remembered who he was. I watched a couple of their streams and whatnot, and I remember, and I watched them primarily for Bodie Wild because everybody was talking about this guy. And Pavanka was one of the forwards that really stood out to me. Well, sure enough, obviously the USA Hockey noticed him too, made this team, and I've liked what I've seen from him throughout the first year with the program. I misspoke. He isn't a tall guy by any means, but he plays that way. He plays a real physical game. He has that mean streak to him, but he is skilled. That's how a lot of these guys are that come in and they're kind of like grinders, but they're not grinders. They can put the puck in the back of the net. They have skill. So that's the game that I think Jake Pavanka plays. Tyler Weiss as well is another good player. I noticed him a lot throughout playing, or I'm sorry, throughout watching the games. From North Carolina, committed to BU. So again, that's kind of a little brief rundown of the U-18 group this coming year. Sorry, someone just pulled into my driveway. I was just watching them real briefly. And these are some of the names that I think are worth watching for this coming year. So that's going to be the U-18 group this coming year. I'm going to talk about the U-17s and the incoming group now, and we'll just go from there.